Hello, the following is a recording of a meeting between me, Jonathan Livslyst, and Victor Maury. Specifically, he wants to know how I work with my paintings, my landscape pieces, because to him they appear like magic. Now, he is a fantastic artist, so I can't just be, remember the horizon and whatnot. It really has to be about the concepts that he can then go and use for his own work, that if he wants to do like bigger landscape pieces. We're going to be talking about more like the concepts of vision, of how I use these ideas to basically guide my text decision, how I use the basic idea of the piece to filter out wrong decision making, where you might paint something that looks really good, but it's wrong for the piece. We'll be talking about visual pins. We'll be talking about how to actually navigate abstract painting to make things that feel like things, even if without being necessarily having painted the detail. Okay, let's get started.
Well, it is my great honor on this fine Tuesday morning to be the one picking Jonathan's brain today.
Yeah.
A little role reversal. We're going to dig into many of your landscape pieces, which from where I'm sitting are a complete mystery as to how you accomplish these. And so I think it'll be very illuminating both for me and for the audience to get a little peek behind the scenes as to how you construct something that to me just looks immensely complex. Not knowing really how to tackle something like this.
Yeah. And then also, of course, to anyone who is turning in for the first time, I am Jonathan and this is Victor. And we are both, no, it's totally fine. We are both artists who I think, combined experience some
like a decade for me.
Decade for me. So it's like 20 years of artistic expression and professional work that come forward here in kind of like just examining like what we like about art. That's like the theme of it. We want to take a time to discuss what we, things that we want to learn from, and then also to share that experience with others. So we get like how could you say?
Just generally geek out.
Yeah, we get to geek out.
The stuff we like, yeah.
And we get to frame it as like, oh, we're doing like this as
it's educational.
It's educational, but really we just want to like sit and be like, oh, isn't this cool as hell? So we're going to be talking about, we're going to start from this painting here.
Does this have a name?
Well, I just named it Emperor City because it has this like grandiose thing. I did write some things for this project, but that's not public yet, so it's just like Emperor City would be the name of it. This painting, it was more like a long process because you can't make something like this in like one go, in a sense of like there's just too many objects in the painting.
That's how it feels to me as well. That's good to hear.
But this is not like something that came out of like one shot where like I just imagined it as a complete item to begin with. It was really a matter of I started somewhere, and then I slowly found the piece as I was working on it throughout.
It reveals itself.
Yeah, exactly. Because ultimately, in many cases, like you start from like one place, like you go, oh, I want to have like the painting and needs to have these qualities. There's these usually what defines the painting's end result is more like limitations of like, okay, you can't spend more time on it, or you lean into like, oh, it is a 2D painting, so there are some elements we can use to make the work easier. And so what I really think is like important to note here is that I've used the texture and the way that objects are separated to the advantage where I managed to actually have to paint less. When I'm zooming in here, you can kind of see that all of these things, they have the texture of a long distance city, but it's really what matters is the spacing of like this feels like a house because we know orange on top, white on the bottom, and that's been established much earlier in the painting. So you kind of like use the idea from this initial setup to then go and read this right away. And it also goes here for like we recognize like a bridge shape, and so even though I might not have the final design drawing for this bridge, this gateway, we can kind of see that it creates a natural flow for the eye to kind of say, okay, this is like a chain of islands that are like built on these volcanoes. And
same with the volcanoes, right? You establish the one in the foreground.
Yeah, and then you only need one last piece here, like because like ultimately, if you think about it, what we're looking at when we are looking at images is we're really trying to recognize what is it that you're looking at. And then once we find that, then we look for more evidence that what you saw, what you imagine it to be, is correct. So if I may digress just a slight bit before we come back all the way to this painting, my initial sketches, this is from the sketches.
This is cool to see. This is cool to see.
And like I really love actually looking at like my initial sketches, because most of the time I kind of completely forget where I start any painting. And so when you know, the initial setup can be so different than like artificial comments, but you can still see I have the Sphinx as like the central image, the central part where like, okay, this is what I want. And then I have a city that's kind of like going here with some water. And then I want the eye flow to go around, and there's a temple on the right. And all those things are indicated by the very first object, right? And there's also something in the foreground here. I wanted like some kind of shadow to carve out forward. And then when I then went in to actually work out, okay, what does this actually look like? The initial setup, which I found using like a very simple maquette in 3D, was
okay. So there's a little bit of 3D
because it basically to orient myself. Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
because
ultimately, I
ultimately,
have such a hard time imagining how I would just conceive of the space in 2D without.
Like, I mean, if I go and find the file, hang on.
Because I know you're not using the 3D for fidelity at all, but
No.
placement of objects,
Yes, exactly.
is tremendously helpful.
Like, because ultimately, like I treat my 3D more as a setup for the, you could say, like I'm not a good 3D modeler. My strength is really in like my 2D sensibilities and how I design some of these things. And so you can kind of see that all of the work that's been put in, and I'm kind of like aping several like historical buildings. Like there's a bit of like the Pantheon on in.
And you have some great books with like the
top
down layout.
No, it's like I really like to look through like the actual like referencing, not like the what could you say, like the pictures, but actually really like referencing the design, like how these things are built up. And so this 3D model, you can see like I put some trees here, so I kind of get the sense of spacing. And now you can see like I don't even have the curve here properly, because when I'm actually going to paint, this is what I'll do. Like I will actually paint this properly in perspective, but I'm going to use a perspective reference from the like something that I draw rather than something that happens in 3D. Because when you work with 3D directly and you do like good 3D, it's very easy to kind of get stuck in, oh, but I have it's correct in the 3D, so it's correct obviously. And like when I look at this frame, which is something I kind of was looking at while I was like deciding like, okay, how would I actually want to showcase this building? This framing is more for myself, and you can see I am using these it's like a lion stand-in that fits the pose, but obviously it's the wrong material, and I'm not smart enough to actually change the material, so I just reference this. This is my reference. I find the view, and what I quickly realized is that this big sphinx in the foreground was so dominant that it kind of like hit the city. And so my initial outlook was like I wanted to have this like vast feeling in the image. Vista. And so when you have something you look up at, then you kind of like you're forced away from the horizon.
Yes.
And so
you can have both.
So all these stuff below here, they will basically be hidden. And when I was trying to kind of saw like how can I place these things, like there's nothing else 3D about this image. Like then I bring in, I do a light trace of like where these things are, and you can see like lots of these things are like not coming together like quite cleanly, and that is on purpose because I want that kind of like just handmade feeling to it.
But already, if I can just pause you there, I feel like there's such an important decision that gets made even at this stage, because to me, I look at your sketch and I'm already like immediately enticed by this upshot of a sphinx. It already commands so much attention. It's so interesting. It's so figurative, and that's like what I'm drawn to and what I know. But if you go for something like this, you never get the image on the left. And the image on the left, I mean, you go on ArtStation, it feels completely unique. Like it's so seldom used because people are taught like, okay, well, upshot is cinematic, blah blah blah. But to your point, like you would never get this open vista where you discover the entire city like this, and like just thinking through prioritizing what is the most important part of the image like that, I think is already very interesting.
Like one thing that comes comes with that as well is that I still keep the central idea, right? Like if I go here and I zoom in, like the Sphinx,
still quite focal.
Yeah, like the Sphinx is still like the kingpin of the image, like and I mean when I'm talking with my students, or like when I'm like trying to help people, what really comes matter is like you kind of want like a pin that kind of like helps someone move through the image, because you always something that you kind of come back to that reminds you, okay, this is normal, like there's nothing crazy about this, and so it's something that you can recognize and kind of like feel, and then everything relates to that. And I remember because I was reading this is a book from like the early 20th century, and it was like the illustrator who was teaching was like saying, if you're gonna paint something fantastical, like a crazy scene, murder scene or something, remember to include a doorknob.
Yeah, something very normal.
Something that you actually recognize, and then you see what comes out of it.
Yeah.
And the pin in this case is this head, because it's visually it's not the most detailed. It's this one. There's less contrast here, but because of the way that these ferns they come out, I actually paint on this. The way that these ferns they come out, they create this like everything comes back to here. Like all the related lines that follow up, they will bring you back here. And so what I kind of like discovered when I was like painting it was that if this area was too detailed, then what would end up happening was that it became too noisy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're looking at the landscape from that angle, you really want to balance these areas of like rest where you can have time to perceive what is actually happening in the areas that are busy.
And I would argue that's like the pillars, the sphinxes, the mountain to an extent.
Yeah. The pillars have nothing, and then like they're very busy up top, but they're busy in a way that is similar. Like everything comes together. Like, you recognize one, and you only have to see one.
Yeah.
Like you kind of like always looking at something like a boundary. And so if I zoom in here, like you know this one, right? It's like it's the cup, or is it two faces? And you go, like it's probably a cup. But then if you look at the other side, it's the faces, and you can't really see both at the same time because they interrupt the meaning of each other. And so it's a cup, but if it's a cup, then these two can't be faces. And if it's two faces about to like touch nose, then it cannot be a cup, because then that space should be empty. And that comes back to like this feeling of like we're kind of always looking for meaning in everything, because that's very important for survival. If I show you like a pure pattern like this, then it becomes like one. Like you see there's a grill.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult to actually look at, because in this case it's like black and white contrast. Like it's like, I want to turn it off, so we turn it off. But what you're kind of recognizing is that we are looking for like tigers in the grass. Like we're looking for like different changes in this image. So if I take this one, for instance, and I just open it up, if I remove, say I delete one of these, suddenly, because there's a change, all of these fall into order. And that change can be anything. It can be a color change. It can be much more subtle than this, right? Like we can do something like, and then fade it. Like something like this even is enough to kind of give order to the image in a way where suddenly we're seeing a lot of relationships in this. Like we're seeing lines going through, like all these things, they're created by this one change. And so if you think of that, then you can really start to control how the eye wanders through the image just by introducing small changes and then reducing the amount of change that you actually have in the image itself. Like in this case, like I deliberately don't include certain levels of contrast in many areas of the painting because, like for instance, if you look at these two ladies in the seat, right? If I go back to the painting here, so this one. Like they are not detailed because they are at the edge of the canvas.
Yeah.
And so, but I can still have enough details to kind of go like, you can imagine this is like a tea moment, right? What did he say? Oh my God, look, you wouldn't believe, yeah. And so.
I love the obscured guy walking up the stairs too.
And there's also a thing of like when we are looking at any kind of image, like say for instance, like I use Find the Tiger. Like I said it once to a student. I was like, "This is such a good, like, visceral way to capture it." And this picture by Steve Winter, we see the tiger because we see the face. But how much when do you start to recognize that something is off here? And I would say that this little hole up here, in the grass,
all the tiger.
It shows that this is the end where the tiger ends. But also, when we are looking at it, it says something is interrupting the forest.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at it from that perspective, then suddenly like you go, okay, but what am I looking at? What am I looking for? Because we have to remember that the way we perceive the world is not like some objective reality. We're shuffling a huge amount of data from our eyes, and we have to make sense of it very fast because our survival depends on it. And so we are attracted to movement. That's like the first thing of like, if something is moving, we need to see what it is before we can relax. Like if a bird like starts, you go, oh, and then, oh, it's just a bird, then you calm down right away.
Right.
And in the same way of like, in a kind of like in horror, a lot of things that are like, oh, this is scary, is like things moving that are not supposed to.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, someone was here. Like when things are moved, even if it's like, it's like if someone takes my pen and moves it over here, and I didn't intend that, like if you moved it when I was not looking, like I'm like, where's my pen? This is not a horror story in this case, but it's freaky because that means that someone was in here. Someone changed the environment, someone changed the variable.
Implications.
Yeah. And so when we are looking at images like this, we are looking for faces because faces help determine where the body is. And so when you think of like because like there's all this talk about, like silhouettes in art, and like you want to have a clear silhouette, and these things, they interact also with the environment. So if you get cut off by something in the environment, that means that it's in front of you, obviously. But these things can interact in lots of different ways. Like this tiger is very, very clearly well camouflaged in this grass, and like how like the patterns almost like
his stripes look like cast shadows of the reeds.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I'm really impressed with this photo. Like, and so like, if I bring up this Philip Maljevin, I'm not sure what his last name.
This one's a trip.
This one is really trippy to look at, and I saved it in my texture folder as like an inspiration, because I was just like, wow, this is. To me, this is like nuts, because he's really removing information in very specific places. Like there's very few hands and feet actually visible, but because we have these women's faces on the top, we recognize that these dresses are happening, right? Like these dresses are real. But when I zoom in, there's nothing. There's almost like the information has been taken out. So you have the face.
If you lose the top inch of the painting, it becomes almost a pure abstraction.
Yeah, and you see one hand, but
is
it's exactly, is it flowers? What's happening? And you can kind of see that it still does feel like it's moving, like a landscape, like almost like an aerial photo, but without anything that gives us that final context clue that says, hey, this is something. Then you can't see anything, and that, to me, is like a really important piece of like how I construct my paintings, because that's like magic. Yeah.
Can you give us an example in your painting of when you do that? Where it's like the thing that reveals the whole.
Let's see. I mean, I think. Hang on. Let me see. It's not necessarily like a thing that reveals the whole. But because I'm using it like general throughout.
Sure.
But you can kind of see like, if you imagine like if you look at this painting, so this is like a castle wall, and there's some drawings I did to figure out like what is the spacing of these things, but everything is the same color throughout. But for instance, like the texture and how it is placed is a crop from a bigger painting, and you can kind of see like I have like this bridge that's going out from it, and the only way to actually spot it is that the texture is missing almost. Like it's removed, and so its absence of texture that is associated to the rock changes the material in this case. So when I zoom in, like on here,
that's crazy.
Like the strokes, they can't come together to not really reveal anything. So without this top, without the sky, then this castle can't be seen. Almost.
Yeah, it would be camouflaged.
And so when I'm thinking of is like, how can I reduce the total contrast I need, so that where I place the contrast, your eye will go.
Yeah.
Because I don't have movement, but I can have like the black and white. I can have like kind of like color situation. if you think of these characters in the beginning here, like I actually had, this is an earlier version of this painting, and you can see like I did this painting of these this couple here, because in a way like the story was different at some point. And like I can see I'm playing around with a brush here to kind of like make it feel like it's some kind of like shiny metal. And I'm kind of like, the problem with these two characters is that they are pointing out at essentially nothing.
Right.
But they have such a high, like they have such a high peak contrast that you have to determine like, okay, but what are they doing? And so
it becomes about the woman's face almost.
Yeah, it's like so she becomes the pin.
Yeah, but she's looking at something I can't see.
And so you kind of, well, what's happening? And it makes you want to turn around.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, oh, it's sitting up. It would set up for the next shot.
So it fights your whole image almost.
Yeah, it's exactly. So if this was for, say, a project that had like where like I'm setting this up to be the next, and then like a narrative beat, and then looking out, there's some boats, or like there's some kind of catastrophe or something happening, then that shot is appropriate because it draws our attention down there, and then we point, and then we can look, and we follow the eye. But because it's a one-off painting, what I really needed was something that would like help you look up, right? And so this woman here, I chose specifically because I had this like one character here, and I thought, oh, this is actually kind of nice. When you have two colors that are the same, that are running across, then they become a pair. Yeah. And so you kind of like follow the colors around, right? You go like, okay, we have like the red, we have like, you could say like the red pairs. Yeah. There's like a red pair of like of the temple. So everyone who is red belongs in a way to the temple. Yeah. And then there's some atmospheric fall off that comes in. But you can kind of see like arrange these so that there will be like a kind of like a circle going around. Yeah. Of like just in the reds. And the same way you could say it's like also happening here with these like this blue ladies here. Yeah. Because they are creating like an area around where it helps you move around, because they're also in line with the blue light from the shadows that are being cast. So there's the blue from the ground, and then there's them. And they all help kind of like move your eye through this area. So but also, I mean, just like look at her shape. Like I chose to have her have this flow upwards so that when you come down here, you're brought back up. Yeah. Because it basically to solve my problem that I had arrived with having these two characters in, even though I painted them and like I was very occupied with trying to make it work because I had done such a good job. And so like sometimes you have to choose a character who is in a way is nothing. Yeah. But then serves that purpose. She serves the purpose of like moving the eye somewhere else, like to basically control like where the eye goes.
Yeah, it's super different.
It's like, because I feel, I mean, if you just look at the thumbnail view of these two, like you want to go to this characters, like you want to see her face, you want to like look at what's the expression going on. And here, like you're drawn to the center, you're drawn to this pin, and then you use that to move through the image, where depending on where you put it, then you can really try to change like where it goes. And so we know the contrast and the texture and like how we find things by either what is there, right? We see the face, and then we try to find proof that there's a body here, or we see one object, and then that helps us see the next one. So like for instance, here is a Belgian landscape painting of like a scrapped airplane graveyard. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And these foreground planes are actually difficult to see, but he gets away. Our understanding is complete still, because we actually we spotted and we see, okay, this is totally like an airplane, because we have these fuselages that are further down, that are more decrepit, they're more taken down, but we see the whole plane. And so the understanding from this foreground element comes complete because of what we see in the background. So so these two elements, they speak to each other in the same way, you could say, as by having this character very clearly shown. Yeah. We understand this is a person. Right. And even though we
otherwise you might
you go like, what's going on here? Yeah, exactly. And as we go further away, everything is very, very abstract in the background, because like the detail is so small. Like I can't put more stuff in there, because then it becomes too dense. Yeah. Like, the matter of like the density of detail is very important.
And it's interesting. This kind of stuff applies even figuratively. Like if you think of, I remember we would talk about this on Splash. If you have a character that's like punching the camera or whatever, and you have extreme foreshortening on the front arm, it's very important to show the back arm very clearly. Right?
Yeah.
Because then your brain can connect the two.
Yeah.
But if they have two different arms or two different weapons, it doesn't work.
If the hand is missing, then you don't have the clue of like...
You don't have that anchor.
And I think like it's very much like, it's a matter of what grounds the action.
Yeah.
And we come back to the doorknob, right? Like one thing that you can recognize and be like, oh, that's that. Now I understand.
I love the doorknob thing. I'll have to send you one of my favorite examples of that exact phenomenon. It was a Steve Prescott painting, and it's a cat that's just murdered a mouse.
Okay.
It's surrounded by this giant black mass that you then realize is actually hundreds of other rats.
Wow.
Because you just see the eyes, the red eyes.
Yeah.
But what grounds the entire image is one leg of a table. Gives you the whole sense of space. Because otherwise you'd be floating in space. But it's that table leg, man. But it's the doorknob.
It's like just something completely mundane that you immediately recognize, and then you can build. Like I remember talking to someone else about it, and they were like, it's good to help people build their context. Because if you construct something, then you like it. It's like almost like an IKEA effect. So if you're painting something kind of abstractly, but then people get it immediately, they're like, "Oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I understand it.
Smart.
Like I get that. I get that reference, and it makes them feel good." So to talk about like the contrast of stuff, like because obviously when we're looking at like colors, like where you used to kind of like looking at like a color wheel like this, and that is not necessarily like how the light spectrum is. This is like an abstraction that's very useful to pick colors. But if I go and actually I show you like the spectrum itself, like this is a graph from huevaluechroma.com. This website is broken now. All the Flash examples don't work anymore. But it still has some of these graphics that are really great. And this is like the visible spectrum of light as we actually perceive it. So we obviously there's much more light in the world, but this is kind of like what we can see and what we can map out as colors. And you can see that these colors are not in a circle. They're more like a big spectrum.
It's not a full range necessarily.
But it's like this is the full range that we experience. Exactly. And so when you're looking at like something like this, like this relative contrast example, if I go and just open up this here, like for people not familiar with it, like these two colors are the same.
The light and the shadow is the same as the dark and the light. This
A and B, right? Like they're the same. And so that's a really important thing to actually really realize, that we see things again. We observe the world and make sense of it through the relationships of things that are surrounding and often in the case in the immediate surroundings of the object. So when I have this, I can kind of say, okay, these are clearly, one is clear in the light and one is clear in the shadow. But then you go, oh, it's the same. And then it's not like a gotcha, like, oh, haha, like you're so dumb because your eyes can't perceive it. Like you are observing it correctly because, visually these are the same. But if your eye goes, oh, this is the same, I'm not getting tricked by this, then the tiger will get you because its camouflage will work. You're like, oh, but this is the same as this. Like you are looking for the difference, and you're looking for it very quickly because your survival depends on it. Not so much in the modern day, but even still in the modern day, like you need to spot things quite quickly. So if you're distracted by, like, oh, these are the same, then you don't necessarily get.
You won't experience the space.
Yeah, how are you gonna tell like this is like what is where? Because if I make everything dark like that, then I deny, you could say, like the reality of the light that's being processed by this sphere here casting a shadow. So if we map the colors, then this is the spectrum more readily available, where you can kind of see that some colors, they have a certain value range in their relative lightness and brightness, where they have their peak color. I believe it's called just the chroma, like the peak chroma, and it's like the reds and the blue, you can see like they're actually quite far down of like where they experience their highest saturated point. Whereas like something like yellow and this like and pink, for instance, they can be very saturated at a much higher scale. And so painters, when they want to reduce the total contrast in the image, so like not just paint everything black and white, what they really introduce is change in the color, not necessarily in the what's it called? in the
value.
In the value, yeah. So like because then when if I put like if I grab a color here, like I get this very like let's see here. Like visually, these two are the same, but when I turn on the colors, they are very clearly different, right? And I can paint within this, and suddenly like the difference becomes much more stark, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a large degree of like separation where I can actually really do a lot of stuff. Wait, get my color wheel up. Color selector. So this is the lab color selector. I don't know if you ever tried it.
I usually use the wheel these days.
Okay. But this
Lightness.
one actually works as like lightness A and B, and you go A and B. It's just the axis.
Okay.
Like if you imagine this, it's the A and B axis of that. That's just how they named it. And so what it basically does is that.
Oh, so you can stay within the same value band.
Yeah. So I can choose a color, right? I can have like this, and I'm like, I want it to be more blue. Or like I want to move it towards like a cooler color. But you see, like there's actually no optical change at all because it stays within the spectrum. And
this makes so much sense for how your paintings look. I feel like you play a lot with this effect.
And I'm used to seeing it, right? Like I mean, if you look, I mean, you see my house. Like I also indulge in a lot of color.
Yeah.
And like an everyday level. Like I've grown up with color my whole life, and so. My sense of color really comes from just like that I've seen like color in lots of different scenarios, but the way I kind of like move color a lot is this, because then if I have a texture, and I want to poke a hole in the color, then I can do this, and you see like suddenly like this becomes something else entirely, but because that the contrast in the black and white is less, then I'm able to introduce more change. Like if I go back to this painting here, you see like all the choices I made about this mountain, about like changing this like pink, blue, and green, they're all selected based around their black and white relative value, and then also you could say like the suggested saturation of something at this distance. So in that sense, like I choose the colors because of how they group, and that becomes like, and so and because of that, then a lot of these things in the painting, they actually can have the same value, relative value band, so that the background, if you look at it, like it's actually, there's no dark spots.
No, it sits nicely.
And so because that low contrast, then it brings your attention forward because you're looking at the dark spots. In this case, they're all in the foreground,
blue,
and they bring you forward. Even the black and white, like this woman in the center, she stands out because visually there's nothing else. But she's not necessarily a pin because there's a tree in front of her.
Yeah.
And she's kind of hidden away, and she's not doing anything. We don't see her hands, we don't see anything, but we recognize it as a person.
Yeah.
Partly because of this guy. Like if I remove him, then
that's actually pretty crazy, because when you show the values, she's darker than I would have expected, because I know that she's very saturated with blue. But I didn't expect her to be actually like the darkest value in the piece. And she doesn't feel that way because she's obscured by those trees and for all the reasons you mentioned.
Like, I mean, I have like, these two are also quite dark, but they're small.
But they're small.
And it's also, and I chose them to be in that darkness, partly also because if you look at the background behind them, there's this dark green tree.
They would have popped out.
So if this was like a white background, suddenly like that's an inappropriate contrast, because you go, oh, this is clearly the main character coming out.
Right.
And so when you're working on like kind of like making paintings happen, it's really a matter of like, so this is a painting by John Singer Sargent, and what really matters in the sense of like, oh, how do we get the most out of the light? If you look at it, then the white is used for several different ideas. It's used for the lantern that's unlit. It's used for the dress. It's used for the flowers. And what really determines what the object is its shape relative to the background. And he controls the eye flow by having the contrast change behind them. So all these bright white flowers, he has artificially chosen to lighten up the trees behind. If you notice, like there's no dark spot behind any of these.
Yeah, they would get really intense otherwise.
Exactly, like they would feel luminous.
Yeah,
they're actually shining.
A little bit painful to look at, maybe.
Maybe painful. Yeah, true. Actually, like, I'm not sure. But you can't see like, and then what's in front is dark.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like these also go and join with the girls. Like they have like
With
a
the hair
difference.
shape, yeah.
The hair shape, and that's very clear, and they're separated out. But then the control of like where you're supposed to go is obviously you want to look at the faces, and the way that he's controlling that is, well, he has the light from the lantern come up from the hand and into her hair, and here it's actually a much more saturated red than in many other places in the painting. Like it when you see it in person, and like both their faces are lit up, and that also helps them stand out against what is a relatively cool background painting. Like these are not quite the colors, but it's huge in person. It's great.
Oh, I'd love to see it.
We should go for sure. Because Sargent, like what he does a lot with his design grouping is really that he allows these shapes to be lost, and then he modifies the color a bit to kind of reveal like what's actually going on. And so the brush strokes themselves also help like actually to make us understand the shape. Like we understand this pillow is here, but we get the meaning mostly from this area.
Yeah.
Like which is the bedpost.
Yeah.
So without that, if I paint it out quickly, then suddenly like it's like, oh, but where is the wall? Like because this alone is part of our understanding of where is the backdrop of this wall, but it is not alone in itself. So he adds another cue, which is the edge of the bed, which is something that we visually understand.
Yeah.
And then because it's behind what's it called? Behind this
The canvas.
The canvas, yeah. Then we understand. Okay, the canvas is on the bed, and we recognize the different things and like how they're going about it. And if you look at something like this hat on the couch, like if I turn to black and white, and like it's like where is the line that separates? And even in color, it's not necessarily like super clear. But what makes it clear is its full context. Because like for instance, like if you look at this like brushstroke here where it catches a highlight of sunlight, if I remove that, then like the hat's final shape is actually much more difficult to see, because you get that it's interrupting the here, right? It's interrupting this shape here. There's something here, but without this, you don't necessarily get the edge of like how what the size of it is, and it feels more confusing. Like you want to investigate more, and then the detail becomes intrusive. In a sense.
And if nothing else, like actually that one little dot invites you to come investigate the area where you might gloss over the hat entirely, actually.
Yeah. And what I like about it is like this was, I mean, obviously he's a great designer, so I for me, anything that Sargent does is like intentional, because I just have to assume, because he's so much better than me.
Clearly,
and so what I like is that there's this like line of light that's sort of like, actually look back at the painter, and you see like here in the canvas, like here, everything kind of comes back to like let's look at this guy. And so you can say that this little white spot, it actually helps interrupt this whole flow. It creates a flow by how it helps like the eye move in. And so it's like it's not just any white spot, right? Because if I move it like like a bit down here maybe,
or even change the angle at all, because right now it's a little arrow swooping us back in.
It brings us back in. So if I change the shape down here, like that still reads. And like I could totally get like the image wouldn't change dramatically from that, but it's like it's just
that
like,
much stronger that it's exactly the right stroke.
Because it comes back and you go, oh, you're looking here, and like here, and then
grabs you,
because this is not bright, then you follow along. Like it's easy for you to follow your eyes into this, because you want to see what the next thing is, and then you get dragged forward. So I show you the pictures of Jen Arthur's bed.
We're gonna talk about this.
Yeah,
this stuff is crazy.
So this is an aerial photographer. Like he was like the first to do it. 2 minutes. No. But you should definitely, if you're watching here, you should definitely like look it up yourself and just look through his artwork, because it's really special, because he really showcases these ideas very clearly of like, you have something that's entirely abstract, like is this fish scales, is this one?
Is it a roof?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it a gingerbread house?
And then you see one object that gives you the full context. And we were looking at this one together, and it's so abstract. Like this is a low resolution image, and we couldn't get a sense of what it was.
And at first we're like, is it lanterns on the water? Is it sails?
Yeah, or boat. Like it's the boats, exactly. And then we see this deer, and we did find a higher resolution of it. Right? So you kind of see like it's more clear here. It's still a low resolution image, and it's like it's just insane. Like this. It's like a flooded lake or like a floodplain, and the deers are walking through it. But because of the light from the sunset, or the dawn, depending, then it has this like really magical atmosphere. And when I look at it from a distance, I totally see like a bunch of ships gathered, and I think like that's really where you can really take inspiration from like this kind of photography of like, okay, what is the actual, what am I actually looking here? What am I finding? And then you can take that same abstraction and say, okay, what is it that makes me think that? Because it's ultimately like, what is it that makes you think that this is the solution? Yeah. That is like what's happening.
I think we're used to using that for scale. Like people always talk about scale birds or scale animals.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to go one step further and say this is like a context cue.
Yes.
A crucial context cue.
Yeah, that gives us the sense of like what is the complete idea. Because like I have this one because I was looking at these birds, these ibis birds. Looking at this, like you solve the problem of like, oh, what is this? And then you find the camels ultimately. But there's this painting here, and if I go in here and I actually like look at it, this bird is a very important cue. And if I remove them, then suddenly like this is no longer like a flying space anymore. Like it kind of feels like a miniature that he's like sitting in and observing out for like a train station set almost.
Yeah. Or like he's rolling in the grass.
Yeah, it's like and he's just big. Like and so the birds help us give a sense of space, but especially like these birds that are like down here, they give us that space. So, poking holes, and then we can come back. Okay. So it's more like a matter of like when you're thinking about texture as like a total thing, like I feel like when people ask me like, oh, how do you get your pixels to do that? Then it's I get very frustrated because there's not, what I really want is like, why do you include that kind of thing? Like obviously people get it, but I have a feeling like people don't really understand the purpose of like having like holes in the texture. So this painting is by Andrew Wyatt, and it's kind of like an odd piece, but I really like it. And one thing I really like the most is how he has done such a subtle thing with the texture here. He is, if you look at it if you look at this this hill in the background, then what is this texture actually doing to the image, right? Like, and what it's implying is a space behind that's going like this, and there's kind of like a tree cover here that's like more dense. And so by having this little change in this space, he actually makes it feel a lot more like layered, yeah. And it gives it like a lot more space. Like the background comes much closer if the forest is that dense, and I can remove it. Like the texture will still work, but by having it actually there, that helps us like understand like, oh, this is a vast space. And you can kind of see like it's very apparent here in the forest, where like just in the beginning he's kind of setting it up to be, oh yeah, you could walk through here almost. Yeah. You could follow along this path, and then like something else would happen. And it's done in like just such a small sequence of steps, where if I didn't paint it out, it's actually hard to see what this little piece of texture is actually doing for the image. And so,
not to mention the couple of trees that come forward in space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like so it's like, what is the what and I would suggest that if when you're looking at an image, we go like, wow, this is incredible. To really go and try to just see how many context cues can you remove, like paint out
until it breaks.
Until I can't see what it is anymore. Yeah. And then you can kind of see, because like if you go back to this idea of like find the tiger, it's like if there's no head, then there's no then it's harder to spot the tiger. And so if there's a head, you always spot the tiger.
Yeah.
And so the head is very important to us because there's the eyes, we see the direction, we see intent. And we can still understand the tiger from behind because we understand like some of the cues about like the stripes and all whatnot. So when you're looking at like, how can I paint this object in the simplest way possible, what's really important is to just find like what is the crucial step that makes you recognize that that's what it is. So like in here, these trees are visible through the atmosphere that comes from behind them. And so you have the orange glow from the sky, and that really helps us understand like, oh, the vastness of this landscape with this little hill that's basically going up. And that becomes the total scale clue, where if I paint this out, then this painting becomes and the painting comes much closer. And so if you're looking to increase like the scale and like the vastness of your images, it can be really an important thing to consider is like, how are your cues set up? Because information is just information. And so this is a satellite image from, I think from NASA, where like it's like and it's made for science, so like the colors are all messed up because they show data. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, this can be stonework, it can be like jewelry.
Be a microchip.
Yeah, it could be a microchip because it follows the same patterns. And in you saying it's a microchip, then it's like, what is it about a microchip that feels like this? And if you can paint that, then you can paint a microchip, but you could also paint a diamond. And so if you recognize how to paint like a few things that are like entirely abstract, then as you are painting them, you come into a point of like, oh, what am I seeing here? Once you recognize that, oh, I'm about to spot a tiger, I'm about to spot a boat, I'm about to spot some water in this abstract painting, then you recognize something about how you can paint that in the future. Because ultimately, like the way I handle texture and the way I do this comes a lot from like many years of me just messing around and making paintings that are not at all about anything. But then I do a bit and I'm like, oh, this feels like rock. And then, but when you zoom in, again, without the full context, this is just marks. This is just brush marks. And so as we add more and more context, it becomes more and more mountainous. And maybe that's partly like when we see the sky, we go, oh, this is a big rock. And if we zoom in, it's like the scale could be anything. And so if I'm looking here at this piece, like the dusk and the feeling, but when you zoom in, like the detail I kept for the mountain is only enough to suggest the light on the mountain, and there's like magic.
Not even there.
It's like there's no mountain. You're suggesting it, and so by having it be invisible, and you basically building it in your head, then I have to paint less.
Yeah.
But I also, each thing I add is very important to the read and the final image. Because I mean, ultimately, like zooming in on these, like these are nothing. But what I'm looking for when I'm like trying to recognize what am I painting is really not necessarily like how does it look, but it's more what is the spacing and density of the texture itself.
Yeah.
So here I'm like, oh, pavement feels like this, and I can paint it quickly and get a sense of like, oh, this is like what rocks would feel like, by just recognizing what is the actual distance between each rock that you would expect, and then depending on how that looks like, then it will feel like a pavement in perspective. But I think when you zoom out, like, it feels okay.
Yeah, turns
like,
into
it suddenly it becomes something.
Cobblestone.
But when I zoom in, it's not cobblestone at all. You could not I could not recognize that because I'm missing the cue. If I put a foot or a table leg on it, I mean, it's weird to put a table on it, but so you kind of see how that comes back to this part, right, of this painting, where if you then go back and look at all these different elements, like I'm setting up these houses in the foreground so that when I zoom, like at the very, zoom in very much, like this is the distance and the density of a city. But clearly I have just taken a square brush and kind of like erased in and out of it until it had the right density of detail.
Yeah.
And then that was enough. And then of course I kind of have an idea of like what it would look like, because obviously I placed some details here in the proper space. But when I was painting this, I was really not trying to zoom in and be like close, because like, if you look up close, like
what scale do you paint at, would you say? Even for the background.
Even for the background, because like
it has to be relative to the foreground.
I have this unhinged setup where I'm painting on both screens at the same time. So I usually have one that is distant like this in full view, and I have one that's like zoomed in, but never more than like full size like this.
Yeah.
Because if it's so easy to get like tricked into like, oh yeah, like this is totally visible on the final image, and you realize like you at 500% zoom, and you go,
and then it breaks in reverse.
Yeah, it's like because
like it works small, but then it becomes abstract large.
And what's going on? Because like I mean, if you look at it, like I kind of imagine this like temple on the water, and I'm doing a drawing of it, like, and I kind of like, oh, this would be like a cool thing, and then you have like the background of the Emperor City in the background. You can like have that be abstract, and I'm doing a piece with that. But when I try to include that detail I drew of like this design I made, this is the highest frequency of detail it can actually exist within, because when I zoom out, it's like, what is that? Oh, it's a bit of glowing. It has a bit of shape, and then what really carries it is like just this reflected light. That's the context cue, is the reflected light. It helps us actually see, oh, this is something that goes up on the water. Because I mean, without it, then this becomes just like another little city dot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna multiply that maybe.
No, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like it becomes just like a little dot. Anyway, and so when I have these, like, because I mean, for instance, like one of the cues I kind of had was like, I have this bird swarm, and like this is not visible at all in the final. It's like,
can you feel it when you zoom out?
Yeah, you can. This is not a detail necessarily for the audience, because this painting will never be printed big enough where you could actually go in and look at the pixel like that. But because I have these birds that I can't do here, that you see, I have
thanks to these birds, you can have splatter birds everywhere.
I mean, look, this is a soft brush set to dissolve.
Yeah.
That has the density of birds, you could say. And so I kind of move that, and like, okay, there's like a swarm of birds, and as it goes further away, I increasingly make it more and more abstract, because it will compete if all these are visible, because they're so small. And what I really wanted was this feeling of like a swell of birds, and these birds are actually a holdover from a previous solution, because when I was trying to make these characters work, I was like, okay, but maybe I changed the narrative a bit, and I was gonna have them release birds.
Oh.
So I was having this character like basically like letting go of a little bird here, and it just didn't work. I was really
very attention.
It looked beautiful. Like imagine this like big red bird like right here in the center of the image, like flapping. Like you kind of have the flapping. So I included them because like it was like a flock of birds, and there was all this stuff, and I was like, kind of that's cool, and ultimately it brought the image forward to the very, very front foreground, where I kept thinking like, if this is the narrative, then I would change the camera. Like if I was taking a photo of this situation, I would be here and here, and then it was so it
goes back to your first decision. Like, look, we did this so that we can go explore the city.
We want to have this feeling of like vastness and these temples, and we kind of have this feeling of like that there's a lot more that goes on than what you mean. And because the theming is like a kind of like this epic city, then no individual character can really be important, because it's not about any of them. You get a kind of context with these temple guards and like what they have, and their staves. They have a symbol that appears in other parts of what I'm writing for. But ultimately, like, because he's holding this staff, I can hide this staff behind this tree, and it still reads, because you understand like he's obviously holding it, even though like if I turn this layer off, like there's painting, there's nothing.
No, but through the repetition, you set up that system.
Yeah, I mean like.
But that's a good note to end on, just because I have to
go. Yeah, of course.
But the idea that if you're very clear on your initial statement, the things that don't feel right during the process are when you're fighting that statement. Yeah. And the things that work and flow are when it goes with your statement. And if you want to change your statement, you're going to have to change larger parts of the piece. You can't just be like, oh, well, I have to change the foreground bird catcher.
You cannot.
It's like, no, that's not the problem.
You cannot force it.
Yeah.
And I think like...
You have to zoom back out and be like, what are you even trying to do?
What is... And it's like, ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is like, once the image has enough information, then it carries itself. And you really like... And there's so much like free stuff in a painting that really comes from just listening to like what is the conclusion of that detail. And so like I needed a certain level of city painted for this to feel like a city, but I'm also like very constrained for time for my personal work, so I couldn't like have it be all visible in your face, because it would take forever to actually draw it out for, I think, narratively and visually very little gain. So that's partly why I have these palm trees covering everything, because when you zoom in, like this is there's nothing here. I mean, you see like there's a bit of squares going on. Like there's a bit of like density. I'm like, oh, there could be something. It feels like something. But I couldn't take the time to develop the whole city, because this is like an ideation piece. I'm trying to think this idea out, and all these elements might change. So me committing like another 2 months of just like design work for something that will not necessarily come forward, it's not worth it. So sometimes you add a big detail that to help like it hide what you don't necessarily need for the narrative, and so that can also be like where like these things that come together. So this is about painting. Only 15 minutes over. That's great.
Yeah, not bad.
Well, does that answer your questions, Victor?
It opens a whole new world of questions, Jonathan. But that'll be for next time.
That'll be for next time.
Oh, but that was awesome.
Yeah.
I love all the ideas. Find the tiger, poking holes, having the anchor point. I feel like there's a lot of takeaway, and the context. The context cue. Yeah. I think is a super interesting one for efficiency and for clarity. Yeah. So I'm gonna be taking those into my personal work.
It's also how I'm really grateful to hear that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think like what really brings all these things together is that they are synergistic. Yeah. Like once you understand that solving one actually solves the others, then the way you work can change in many ways, because you can change one detail somewhere else in the painting and that actually solves something that is a problem somewhere else. Like, because if you think like these things, I deliberately didn't have to paint. I didn't have to paint them fully detailed, because they're almost like an area of rest in all this in all this busyness that's happening around them, among all this texture. So I had to paint them simply, and that helps them actually read, because like they become this like, oh, like you want to go here because they are so different than everything else. But in the black and white, you see like I chose this gold from the relative difference between this white marble and this, and then I just went full sended and in terms of saturation for that. Sure. And then because of that, then they actually just read very clearly. So sometimes a detail feels wrong because the context surrounding it throws that detail off. Yeah. And it's very important to have the dialogue both with, is this hand, like sometimes because people are like, oh, hands and heads, that's very difficult. But in the environment, a lot of things can throw other things into disarray, where because the density of detail in one area, it necessarily requires something from the rest. And if you can recognize that, then you can play up the difference in like very densely detailed and no detail. Like, because I have like a lot of textures here, like these like mosaic implications of like this. It feels like a mosaic at least, and I if they were very high contrast, then they would throw everything off. So because I know they fit into a larger system, because of that, I know okay, I need to not have them interfere with anything. And so while I was painting them, then I really had to avoid introducing too much. And so because of the surroundings that I was in a way gardening and taking care of and gardening for, that limited what it could be. Yeah, but it also made it easier to do it because I now had a range that was a constraint. Right. Yeah. And so
that makes sense.
The whole point of like, because when we went back to the initial sketch that's here, when you were like, we look up and it's a very epic like a statue painting, but the view of looking up creates a constraint about like what we can perceive down there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and if we do it, then it's like, if you make it too interesting to look down, then it's like, well, why aren't we turning the camera down? And so I think like just like this really thinking of like, what is the visual constraint that you actually introduce by making this change, helps also avoiding a whole lot of like random changes.
And the piece fighting itself the whole way. Yeah.
Because some people are like, I need to improve this painting, and they just add one thing. Yeah. And it's like, hey, no, hang on. Explain to me why you included that new thing. Yeah. Like, what does it add or remove? Something instead? Yeah, exactly. Like, and there's like that absence of detail can then help like the rest of the view actually be stronger. Again, like remove the context until you can no longer find it. And then you go, okay, what is necessary for that to actually be there still? And if you can recognize that, then like like the creativity aspect of like making images is definitely like way broader.
And it becomes more poetic, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'll leave you on that note, Jonathan. All right. Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Victor.
Dude.
And
till the next one.
Till the next one. Yeah, that was awesome. Great. So that's checking the audio recording. It was recording the whole time.